Have you ever wondered what is silently sabotaging your peace of mind? There are habits, thoughts, and actions that, even invisible, drain our energy and keep us from the serenity we seek so much. Today, you will discover 7 things that must be silently eliminated to achieve a more stoic and fulfilling life. Ready for this transformation? At the heart of Stoicism is the pursuit of a life guided by reason, temperance, and emotional freedom. This ancient philosophy, followed by great minds like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, teaches that many of our pains come from what we allow to remain in our lives. In this video, you will learn what these 7 things are that, once eliminated, can make room for true happiness and personal growth. Shall we dive? Main content. Chapter 1. Repetitive negative thoughts. Negative thoughts have the power to insidiously corrode the soul, like a current of water that slowly and persistently wears away even the most solid of rocks. They infiltrate the mind with the subtlety of a whisper, and before we know it, take over our being. It is not surprising that Marcus Aurelius observed so clearly, "A man's life is what his thoughts make of it." How can we not reflect on the impact we allow these shadows to have on the brightness of our existence? Imagine for a moment a garden, beautiful and promising, where colorful flowers rise towards the sun. Now visualize weeds spreading, sucking nutrients from the earth and stifling plant growth. Negative thoughts are those weeds. They stifle our aspirations, divert our focus, and prevent us from seeing the world in its fullness. However, unlike the physical garden, which is visible and tangible, our mind operates on a more discrete plane, making the weeds of thoughts much harder to notice. How many times have you found yourself revisiting a past mistake, as if the simple act of rethinking could rewrite history, or anticipating a problem that has not yet occurred, but that seems to carry with it the weight of a cruel certainty? It is at this point that Stoicism offers us a map to get out of this mental maze. He invites us to pause, to a moment of calm analysis where we can ask, what are these thoughts really bringing to my life? Now imagine a hypothetical scenario. Inna, a young woman who, every day, relives an incident at work where, through carelessness, she made a public mistake. Although the incident occurred months ago and has already been forgotten by her colleagues, Anna keeps the episode alive, replaying it in her mind like a worn-out film. Your mind, once fertile for ideas and creativity, has become an arena for constant, relentless judgment. What Anna is missing here is the practice of replacing negative repetition with more compassionate self-talk, something the Stoics practiced as a daily exercise. Stoic meditation, in this sense, is not a complex ritual, but a moment of conscious reflection. She asks us to look at our concerns logically. Is what I'm thinking helpful? Is it under my control? Does it add anything to my life? These simple yet profound questions can be like a key to unlocking a door we have kept closed out of, fear or habit. However, it is worth remembering that eliminating negative thoughts does not mean ignoring or repressing emotions. Quite the contrary. Stoicism encourages us to feel fully, but with a clear understanding that we are not slaves to these emotions. Think of it like watching a storm. You recognize its strength and intensity, but you know that at some point it will pass, and the sky will be clear again. Let's go back to the garden. Just as the gardener must identify weeds and remove them carefully, we must also cultivate our minds carefully. Sometimes this means replacing a destructive thought with a positive idea. Other times, it simply means not feeding what eats away at us. It's constant work, yes, but it's also liberating. After all, as Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. A metaphor that may be useful is that of the artist carving a statue from a block of marble. Each stroke of the chisel removes excess, reveals shapes, and creates something beautiful and intentional. This is how we are when working on our mind. Each effort to eliminate negative thoughts is like a chisel blow, shaping a clearer and more harmonious version of ourselves. Maybe you're thinking, but how do I get started? The answer is in practice. Small steps, like writing a journal, can be the start of a big change. writing down the thoughts that disturb us the most, and then reviewing them with a rational perspective can be incredibly transformative. This practice helps us see the mind as a mirror that from time to time needs to be cleaned to accurately reflect reality. Ultimately, eliminating negative thoughts is less about fighting them and more about redirecting our energy toward what really matters. It is an act of silent courage, a commitment to inner peace, and just like a well-tended garden or a carefully carved statue, our mind, when worked with patience and intention, becomes a space of beauty and strength that cannot be shaken by the storms of life. Chapter 2. The need for absolute control. Search for absolute control is an illusory dance with reality, where we insist on holding the reins of an untamed horse. As much as we want to control every detail of the universe around us, life, with its sublime irony, always finds ways to remind us that control is, at best, a fleeting illusion. As Epictetus said, with the wisdom of someone who understood human limitations, happiness depends on knowing what is in our control and what is not. This line of thinking is both liberating and challenging. Liberating because it frees us from the burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. Challenging because it forces us to recognize that not everything is subject to our will. We are often like children trying to hold water with our hands. The more we squeeze, the faster it escapes. Imagine, for example, Enrique, a man with a meticulously planned life. Every minute of your day is calculated, every decision made with the certainty that success depends exclusively on your ability to control. However, Enrique cannot control the traffic that delays him, the decisions made by his colleagues that influence his work, or even the small surprises that life has in store for his carefully structured routine. The result? Frustration. Your quest for control, instead of bringing peace, traps you in a cycle of anxiety and exhaustion. It's curious how we often confuse control with security. We believe that by having complete control over everything and everyone, we will be protected from life's adversities. However, true security lies not in control, but in acceptance. When we learn to let go of the reins, we discover that life continues to flow, regardless of our efforts. More than that, we realize that some of the best things happen precisely when we stop trying to govern every detail. Stoic practice teaches us to differentiate between what we can and cannot control. This distinction is like a map that guides our efforts, allowing us to direct our energy to where it can truly make a difference. For example, we can control our attitudes, but not the attitudes of others. We can choose how to react to a situation, but we cannot prevent it from happening. This understanding is one of the greatest gifts of Stoicism. Let's go back to Henry. What if, instead of trying to control traffic, he used the waiting time to reflect or listen to something inspiring? What if, instead of getting frustrated with his colleagues, he sought to adapt his actions to what is within his reach? These small shifts in perspective could transform his experience, not because the world around him changed, but because he chose to change his relationship with the world. Accepting that we have no control over everything does not mean resignation or passivity. Quite the contrary, it is an act of courage. It's looking at life honestly, recognizing our limitations and still choosing to act within the possibilities we have. It's like sailing on a river. You don't control the current, but you can adjust the rudder to go in the desired direction. Another useful metaphor is that of a gardener who, faced with a storm, knows that he cannot stop the rain or the wind. He can, however, prepare the soil, protect the most fragile plants, and trust that the storm, like all others, will also pass. Likewise, we can prepare our minds and hearts to face life's uncertainties, knowing that absolute control has never been and will never be an option. Sometimes the need for control is also born from fear. Fear of the unknown, of failing or losing something we value. However, by letting go of this fear, we realize that there is strength in vulnerability and freedom in acceptance. When we stop fighting the uncontrollable, we make space for serenity and true wisdom. After all, as Epictetus wisely put it, It is not things that disturb us, but the opinions we have about them. When we change the way we look at situations, we begin to realize that even without control, we can live with balance and purpose. Therefore, letting go of the need for absolute control is ultimately an act of self-love. It's choosing to live lightly, embracing life's uncertainties, and trusting that, even without holding all the reins, the path can still be beautiful and meaningful. Chapter 3. Toxic relationships. Relationships, at their essence, are like mirrors. They reflect our hopes, fears, and sometimes even the parts of ourselves we would rather keep hidden. However, there are mirrors that distort, that show us unrecognizable versions of who we are, or that fragment our image into pieces that are impossible to put together. These are toxic relationships which, instead of nourishing, drain our energy, corrode our peace, and leave us adrift in turbulent seas. There is something almost hypnotic about toxicity, a force that binds us and makes us believe that we must persist, even when the weight of the bond is greater than any benefit it can bring. Who has never found themselves trapped in a relationship that seemed to demand more than it had to offer? Maybe it's a friend whose words sound like criticism disguised as advice, a partner who turns every argument into a battle for the last word, or a co-worker who thrives in an environment of constant competition. In all of these cases, the common denominator is the feeling that we are losing ourselves in order to maintain something that should strengthen us. Stoicism offers us a valuable perspective for dealing with these situations. He reminds us that we cannot control the behavior of others, but we can decide how to respond to it. Epictetus, with his characteristic clarity, taught that we are responsible only for our actions and thoughts. This lesson, although simple, carries transformative power. It allows us to recover the autonomy that often seems to disappear amid toxic dynamics. Imagine Clara, a young woman who, for years, maintained a friendship with someone who constantly diminished her achievements and questioned her worth. Every interaction seemed to make Clara more insecure, more unsure of herself. Despite this, she continued to invest in the friendship, like someone trying to recover a treasure lost in a bottomless pit. When Clara finally decided to walk away, she felt the weight of guilt and emptiness, but she also experienced something new, the space to rediscover her strength and identity. What Clara learned is something that everyone, at some point, needs to understand. Not every bond needs to be maintained. There are relationships that teach us, that shape us, but that also have an expiration date. Recognizing this is not an act of selfishness, but of self-love. After all, how can we flourish if we surround ourselves with shadows that block the light? When deciding to move away from toxic relationships, we encounter one of the biggest challenges, the fear of emptiness. It's easy to think that by cutting a tie, we will become isolated or incomplete. However, this emptiness need not be a painful absence. It can be a fertile field, ready to be filled with more genuine and meaningful connections. It's like pruning a tree. The cut may seem drastic, but it's necessary for new branches to grow. Still, removal is not always the immediate or possible solution. In some situations, especially in family or professional contexts, we are forced to live with toxicity. At these times, Stoic practice invites us to set clear boundaries and cultivate resilience. It's like building an internal shield which protects us without completely isolating us. We learn to observe, recognize patterns, and respond calmly rather than reacting impulsively. On the other hand, it is also essential to reflect on our role in the relationships we cultivate. Stoicism does not allow us to escape responsibility. Maybe, at some point, we were the source of negativity in a connection. Recognizing this takes courage, but it's a vital step toward breaking cycles and creating healthier bonds in the future. When ending a toxic relationship, the freedom we felt may initially be accompanied by a sense of loss. However, over time, we realize that this empty space is an opportunity for rebirth. we begin to attract people who share our values, who inspire us, and who walk alongside us instead of pulling in opposite directions. As Seneca said, "No wind blows in favor of those who don't know where to go." By freeing our lives from relationships that divert us from our purpose, we create conditions for the winds to take us to more promising horizons. This journey is not easy, but it is essential. After all, we deserve to be surrounded by those who add, who illuminate, and who help us grow, instead of dragging us into darkness. Chapter 4. Constant comparisons. Constant comparison is one of the most subtle and corrosive traps of the human mind. It's a habit that creeps in almost without warning, like a shadow that follows our every step, always, whispering that we are not enough. In a world where the lives of others are displayed like glittering shop windows, the temptation to measure our worth by the success of others becomes almost irresistible. And yet, there is something deeply destructive about turning existence into a silent competition where the prize is never within our reach. Perhaps this is due to the way we have been conditioned to see progress as if it could only be validated by external references. From an early age, we learn to measure our achievements in comparison to those of others. Grades at school, achievements at work, relationships, possessions. It's as if we were running a marathon where everyone's route was different, but we insisted on looking to the side, ignoring that the goal is unique for each runner. Stoicism offers an alternative to this modern dilemma, even if its essence is timeless. Marco Aurelio, in his Reflections, wrote, "Don't waste any more time arguing about what it means to be a good person. Be one." This maxim reminds us that the only valid comparison is with who we were yesterday. Instead of wasting energy trying to outdo others, we should be channeling it into improving ourselves, becoming better versions of ourselves. Imagine Louisa, an artist who spent years admiring and resenting the success of her contemporaries. Each exhibition, each award they won was like a reminder of Louisa's own insecurities, which often paralyzed her. She spent more time comparing herself than creating, but upon realizing that the true measure of her talent was not external recognition, but rather her dedication to her craft, Louisa found freedom. Little by little, she learned to create out of passion, not validation, and this change transformed her art and her life. The great paradox of comparisons is that they ignore the complexity of life. When we look at others, we only see the surface, the victories, the happy moments, the achievements. We don't see the challenges, the fears, the failures that exist behind the facade. When we compare ourselves to these edited versions of reality, we put ourselves in an impossible position, measuring our wholeness against other people's fragments. It's like trying to compare the depth of an ocean with the transparency of a lake. Two distinct beauties, incomparable in essence. Furthermore, constant comparison robs us of the present. When we are so focused on what we lack, we forget to appreciate what we already have. We miss the opportunity to celebrate our own victories, small or big, because we are always looking at the next step, always wanting more. This chronic dissatisfaction is a prison we create for ourselves, and the key to breaking out of it is gratitude. By recognizing and valuing what we have already achieved, we begin to break the cycle of comparison and focus on what really matters. Of course, it's important to differentiate inspiration from comparison. Admiring someone and learning from their achievements can be a powerful fuel for our growth. But there's a fine line between being inspired and being consumed by envy. When we cross that line, we lose sight of our own path and become hostage to expectations that don't always reflect our true desires or values. The practice of avoiding comparisons requires conscious effort. It's a daily exercise in self-compassion and self-reflection, a commitment to looking inward instead of outward. Every time we are tempted to measure our life by someone else's ruler, we must ask ourselves, is this helping me grow, or just fueling my dissatisfaction? This simple question can be a powerful guide to redirecting our thoughts and actions. Ultimately, Letting go of the need to compare yourself is an act of liberation. It's like letting go of a weight that we carry. Without realizing it, a choice to walk lightly, without the pressure of being better or greater than others. When we stop competing with the world, we discover the peace of simply being, and in that serenity we find the space to flourish in our own way, unique in our essence, like each flower in a vast and diverse field. Chapter 5. Lack of purpose. A lack of purpose is like a broken compass in the middle of an infinite ocean. Without a clear direction, life can seem like a succession of indistinct days, where each decision seems disconnected from a greater meaning. It's a feeling that doesn't discriminate. It can affect both those who have everything they want and those who struggle to achieve the least. The absence of purpose transcends external conditions and rests deeply in the soul, feeding an emptiness that no material achievement can fill. There is something unsettling about the idea of existing without a defined purpose. As human beings, we have an almost instinctive need to find meaning, to attribute meaning to our actions and the events that surround us. That's why so many people dedicate their lives to searching for something that makes them feel complete, whether it's relationships, careers, or ideals. However, this search is not always easy, and the path can be winding, full of doubts and moments of discouragement. Stoicism offers light to those who feel lost in this existential maze. Marco Aurelio, in his writings, reflected on the importance of living aligned with greater values, understanding that the purpose does not need to be grand in the eyes of the world. He said, "Be like a rock against which the waves continually crash, but which stands firm." This firmness of spirit comes from clarity of purpose, from the understanding that each choice, no matter how small, can be aligned with something greater than ourselves. Think about John, a man who spent years chasing success in his career without ever asking himself why. He racked up promotions, pay raises, and prestige, but felt strangely dissatisfied. Everything changed when João started dedicating part of his time to volunteer work, helping children in vulnerable situations. It was in this act of service that he found something that resonated deeply in his heart. The career still mattered, but now it made sense within a larger context. John realized that purpose is not something we find in big epiphanies, but in the small actions we take with intention. The void left by a lack of purpose can lead people to become distracted by temporary substitutes, excessive consumption, the incessant search for external validation, or even dependence on habits that only mask the absence of meaning. It's like trying to quench your thirst by drinking salt water. No matter how much we try to fill the void, it only grows. True purpose, however, is not in something we acquire, but in what we build internally. Finding that purpose requires introspection, an honest look within. We need to question what really matters, what moves us, what makes us feel alive. For some, this may be about creating something lasting. For others, in helping others or in living in a way that is aligned with their values. There is no single formula, because the purpose is as unique as each individual. However, the search for it is universal, a journey that we are all called to undertake at some point. Still, it's important to remember that purpose doesn't have to be something immutable or grand. It can change over time, adapt to circumstances, and grow with us. Sometimes it reveals itself in the little things. A smile we share, a task we accomplish with dedication, a moment of genuine connection with another person. These small actions, aligned with our values, form the foundations of a meaningful life. The lack of purpose should not be seen as a failure, but as an invitation to reflection. It's a call to slow down, to ask ourselves what we really want and why we do what we do. And by answering these questions, we begin to build a life that is not just lived, but worth living. As Zeno of Citium taught, purpose is intrinsically linked to virtue, living according to our highest essence, seeking good not just for ourselves but for those around us, is a sure path to finding meaning. It's not about grandiosity or recognition, it's about authenticity. and connection. In the end, purpose is not an end point, but an ongoing journey. It is not something we simply encounter, but something we choose, moment by moment, in each action, in each decision. It is like a lighthouse that guides us, not necessarily to a specific destination, but to a life that in its simplicity reflects what is most genuine in us. Chapter 6. Accumulation of material goods. The accumulation of material goods is one of the most persistent illusions of modern life, a mirage that promises eternal satisfaction but often delivers only endless emptiness. It's like trying to fill a bottomless vase. No matter how much we add, it never seems to be enough. This obsession with having above being turns achievements into empty milestones, where the next object of desire is already waiting to replace the previous one, before we can even taste the joy of what we already have. We live in an age that glorifies possession. From an early age, we are taught to associate value with the amount of things we accumulate. The biggest house, the newest car, the most advanced cell phone, it all seems like a status symbol, a reflection of our supposed success. But deep down, do these things really define who we are? Or do they distance us from what is essential, creating a constant noise that prevents us from hearing our own voice? The Stoics, always wise in their reflections, warned us about the dangers of basing our happiness on external possessions. Seneca, in particular, said that true wealth is not in accumulating possessions, but in desiring less. This lesson, so simple and at the same time so profound, resonates as an antidote to the culture of abundance that surrounds us. When we realize that what we have will never be enough to fill an internal void, we begin to understand that the answer lies not in having, but in being. Consider the story of Anna, a successful businesswoman who, for years, believed that her happiness depended on reaching certain material milestones. She worked tirelessly, accumulating trophies of her ambition: houses, cars, luxurious trips. But over time, Anna began to realize that each achievement was followed by a feeling of emptiness. It wasn't until she decided to simplify her life, dedicating more time to the people and experiences she loved, that she found a true sense of fulfillment. For Anna, what mattered was no longer what she owned, but what she lived. The problem with the accumulation of goods is not only the impact it has on us individually, but also on the relationships we build and the world we inhabit. Often, in the search for more, we neglect what really matters: genuine connections, moments of simple joy, and the responsibility we have to care for the planet. Unrestrained consumption has a cost that goes beyond the financial. It consumes our attention, our energy, and even our empathy. Furthermore, the accumulation of material goods can become an invisible prison. The more we own, the more we care about maintaining, protecting, and accumulating even more. It's like carrying a backpack full of rocks while climbing a mountain. The weight of the things we possess can prevent us from moving forward, exploring new possibilities, and freeing ourselves from the expectations that the world imposes. The key to escaping this trap is simplicity. It's not about giving up all comforts or living in deprivation, but about adopting a more conscious approach to what we really need. Each object we choose to keep must have a clear purpose, a value that goes beyond the material. This way, we begin to create space, not just physical, but also emotional and spiritual, for what really matters. However, simplifying is not an instantaneous process. It requires introspection, an honest look at our habits and desires. Ask yourself, what am I trying to fulfill with these possessions? What really matters to me? These questions, although simple, can open doors to a more meaningful life, where the focus is on what brings true joy and not just the illusion of more. Along this journey, we learned that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought. Laughter shared with friends, a hug from a loved one, the sunset on a peaceful day, these moments so simple and at the same time so profound are the true treasures that enrich our existence. When we free ourselves from the obsession with accumulation, we discover that we are already rich in ways we never imagined. Finally, abandoning. The incessant desire for material goods is an act of courage. It's choosing to go against the grain of a culture that encourages us to measure our value by what we have. It is a return to what is essential, a commitment to living with intention and purpose. And in this movement of letting go, we find not only freedom, but also the opportunity to reconnect with what really matters, with life in its purest and most authentic form. Chapter 7. Procrastination. Procrastination is a strange paradox. While it offers us immediate relief, it plants the seeds of discomfort that grows every moment we delay the inevitable. It's like a shadow that follows us, silent but insistent, until finally it becomes impossible to ignore. The weight of what we leave for later accumulates, transforming the simple act of starting into a monumental challenge. Interestingly, procrastination rarely arises from laziness. It is often a response to fear of failing, of not meeting expectations, or even of facing success and the responsibilities it brings. When we procrastinate, we create an illusion of control, as if by postponing facing something, we could avoid its possible consequences. But time, impassive as ever, continues to march forward, and what we avoid only becomes more threatening. Marco Aurelio, in his Meditations, reminds us of the brevity of life. He writes, "Don't act like you have 10,000 years to live. Destiny is at your doorstep. As long as you live, as long as you can, be good." These words resonate as a call to action, a reminder that every moment is too precious to waste. Postponing what is important is, in a way, a refusal to embrace life fully, an act of self-neglect that robs us of the present and the future. Imagine Clara, a young woman full of dreams but constantly paralyzed by doubt. She knew exactly what she needed to do to achieve her goals, but instead, she found solace in distractions that only filled time without bringing real satisfaction. One day, tired of the repetitive cycle of postponements, Clara decided to start small. He chose a single task, something simple, and committed to carrying it out. The feeling of completion was such a relief that she felt the courage to face the next one. Little by little, what once seemed insurmountable began to transform into a series of possible steps. Procrastination, however, is not limited to lofty tasks. It infiltrates the small decisions of everyday life, in the moments when we choose the comfort of the now to the detriment of what really matters. It's like a sneaky trap that invites us to believe that there will always be a tomorrow to do what could and should be done today. Fighting procrastination requires more than discipline, requires self-understanding. We need to identify what is behind this habit, what makes us hesitate and seek refuge in postponements. For some, it may be perfectionism, the belief that something should only be done if it can be accomplished flawlessly. For others, it is the lack of clarity, the difficulty in deciding where to start. Whatever the cause, facing it requires courage and a good dose of honesty with yourself. The key to overcoming procrastination is breaking down what seems complex into smaller parts, redefining success as progress rather than perfection. It's learning to value each small advance, to celebrate the act of starting, even if the complete path is still far away. After all, the first step, however insignificant it may seem, is what sets us in motion. And although the beginning is always the hardest, it is also where transformation lies. Every action, no matter how small, carries with it the power to break the cycle of inertia. By deciding to face the initial discomfort, we discover a strength we often underestimate, the strength to create, to complete, to live with intention. The Stoics teach us that the present moment is all we really have. When we procrastinate, we waste not only time, but also the opportunity to connect with the now, to experience what is possible here and now. It is a lesson that, although simple, carries immense depth. To live fully is to be present, to act in alignment with our values, to transform intentions into reality. Thus, abandoning procrastination is not just a matter of productivity, but of freedom. It's freeing ourselves from the weight of tomorrow, the constant postponement of what can bring meaning to our lives. It is recognizing that the present, with all its imperfections and challenges, is the only stage on which we can act. And when choosing to act, we discover that no matter how much time continues to pass, we are the ones who shape its passage with the choices we make. Stoicism invites us to a lighter life where we eliminate what is useless and cultivate virtue. Now that you know the 7 things you need to silently eliminate, how about starting today? Leave a comment with the first thing you want to take away from your life. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and like so you don't miss any content like this. And of course, share with anyone you believe needs to hear this message. SEO optimized description, video, 7 things you need to quietly eliminate. Stoicism. Have you ever felt like you are carrying unnecessary weights in life? In this video, we explore 7 habits and behaviors that, according to the teachings of Stoicism, you must silently eliminate to achieve serenity, wisdom, and personal growth. Follow insights inspired by great thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus as we delve into questions that can transform the way you live. Discover how procrastination, toxic relationships, and the accumulation of material goods may be sabotaging your inner peace and hindering your development. This is a powerful guide for anyone seeking balance, resilience, and purpose in a chaotic world. What you will learn in this video: how Stoicism can help deal with procrastination, the importance of freeing yourself from constant comparisons, why eliminating toxic relationships is essential to your happiness, the impact of a lack of purpose on your life and how to overcome it, how letting go of material possessions can bring true freedom. Watch now and discover how Stoicism can transform your life. Video chapters 000, Introduction 0145, The Need for Detachment 0530, Dealing with Procrastination 1015, Overcoming Toxic Relationships 1520, Finding Purpose in Simplicity. If you like this content, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the bell to receive more reflections on Stoicism, personal growth, and Stoic philosophy. Tags for optimization: Stoicism, philosophy, personal growth, wisdom, serenity, life lesson, resilience, meditation, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. What is Stoicism? Happiness, temperance, reflection. Stoic, personal development, Stoic philosophy, Stoicism, discipline, meditate. Don't miss the opportunity to apply Stoic teachings in your life and achieve true inner peace. Watch now